Contee, Chief of Police of the Metropolitan Police Department. And unfortunately, I'm out here under this circumstance. But I think it's important that we all stand out here collectively, that we're all here together for a number of different reasons. Excuse me, let me take these off. The lens is transition. But what happened out here last night? And I was out here last night. Some of you live here. Some of you may have just been out here having dinner or whatever. But that was unacceptable. It's unacceptable in any community. The reality is we have situations that happen like this in our city, all across our city, and it's been happening for a long time. Last year, we had over 922 people shot in our city. Last year. 198 people murdered in our city last year. This should be shocking to the conscience of every person in our city. I don't care where you live. It's got the attention that it's got now because it's happened where it happened, because we had an incident at the National Stadium. But this issue that's crossing our city, there are too many guns in our city, in Washington, D.C. Last night, before that shooting had happened, the officers, our officers assigned here in the 3rd District, they recovered a firearm off an individual down here at 11th and S in Vermont. Right before that, a firearm right up here, 14th and Irving Street. After the sounds of gunshots, right up there. When this shooting happened, officers, within 5 seconds of the shooting where it happened, that's unacceptable. It speaks to the brazenness of the criminals that are in these communities that we're dealing with. Some of them are our neighbors, some are. And we have to really figure out what do we want to do as a city in terms of how we respond to this. We can take the political route and talk, all of this fluffy stuff. But I'm going to give it to you straight, where the issues are. And where the issues are, the ecosystem, the justice system that we have right now, it is not functioning the way that it should. The courts are not open. That is a fact. Barely open. So cases from last year, from 2020 that happened during COVID, of violent criminals that have not been disposed of, what do you think those individuals are? Anybody want to take a guess? They're in community. They're in community, and their cases have not been disposed of. We have to look at, are the things happening that needs to happen when we do place individuals under arrest? The guy for carrying the gun there, the guy for carrying the gun there. What happens with that case when it goes through the system? What's the outcome? What is the expected outcome? What does the community expect when a person gets caught with a firearm? What do we expect? Do we expect to see them in the neighborhood in 3 weeks? And if we do, are we saying that that's acceptable? Because most of the communities that I've talked to have no clue what happens with these cases. They don't. But I'm going to tell you the truth. The real issue is we have a vicious cycle of bad actors who do things, no accountability, and they end up back in community. And the police officers, and I guarantee you when we lock up whoever did this, they will be no stranger to us. I promise you that. So I want us to make sure that we are reclaiming this community. And my hope is that as we do this, that this reverberates through our city, that this is what the response should look like. It should look like this, right? Because there are a lot of corners that I go to after a murder has occurred, and it's just me. It's just the officers. Who are the people that are closest to the pain, right? That's when we get folks' attention, right? When you're closest to the pain, when you hear the gunshots in your community, that begs a different reaction versus it being someplace else and you just kind of happen to catch it on the news. This was real for some people, but it's been happening in communities all across our city. And I'm saying to you, enough is enough. I've been a police officer in this city for over 30 years. I've been born and raised right here in this city. Started my patrol career right here in this district. And the way that we're going and the things that we're trying to do, we want to help people. Yes, we should. But you cannot coddle violent criminals. You cannot. You cannot treat violent criminals who are out here making communities unsafe for you, for your loved ones, for me, for my loved ones. They might not want a job. They might not. They might not need services. What they may require is to be off of our streets because they're making it unsafe for us. And if that's what it requires, then that's what it requires. And we have to own that. We have to own it, because if not, we see more of this. We see more of this in our communities. And then what happens? When someone's shot, You know, people are outraged by it. I'm outraged every time. Of those 922, a lot of those 198 that died of that, I stood over many of those. Many of them. Watching families suffer when they don't have to, because we're putting violent criminals or allowing them to be back out in community. That's unacceptable. So what do we do about it? We have honest conversations with the people, the leadership, be it the police chief, be it council members, be it courts, be it whoever. It's easy. The police department, we're an easy target. You can easily focus on the police department, about what the police department did, didn't do. That's easy. I'm challenging you to look at the entire system. The laws that are in place for people who carry guns in our community, who do things to people in community, violent acts, are those things acceptable? Are they acceptable? And if whatever you say is acceptable, it's my responsibility to enforce that. That's my job, to respond to those things that the community say, this is what the standard is. If some people knew what the standard is, what the outcome is on the other end of some of these cases, it would blow your mind. Why is it that a guy who murdered somebody is out in community after having been arrested 2 or 3 months prior with a firearm? What do we think he was going to do? The recidivism rate for violent offenders is the highest that we've seen anywhere. 87%, I think, in that area for people who carry guns. They use them. I'm mad as hell about this, and I hope y'all are too. I really do. Because I like coming to 14th Street. I like going to Chicken and Whiskey and getting my chicken out of there and my plantain and everything, my rice, my crab rice. I love that. And I don't want to be afraid for my wife to go there because some knucklehead in community decided to pull out a gun and fire it at 8:20 in the evening. That is unacceptable. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Do we go back to our regular spaces and, back to saying, okay, yeah, we made plenty of legislation and reform efforts for the police. Look at the entire system, folks. That's all I'm asking you to do. Look at the system. How are we holding people accountable? What does that accountability look like, and is it okay with you? On that note, I want us to walk and talk.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
He should be joining us.
He
right?
should be. He really should be. Yes, ma'am. We sure can.
I love what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am.
But looking at the whole system, so
Yep.
I'm the president of the Local Circle Community Association, and we're not regularly in law enforcement, so we don't know that much about the system.
That's fine.
And our terrific council member has been great about starting to explain it to us. But what's the best way for us to fully understand the system, and what's the best way for us to intervene in a way that's helpful in addressing these issues?
I think the first thing that we need to do, we look at we look at cases, right? And we follow cases through the system. That's important. We understand from council members, we understand from police, we understand from prosecutors, we understand from judges, we understand the different perspectives, because everyone has a perspective. And I think as residents begin to kind of understand these things, how the system actually works, I think we will be in a better place as a result of that. And sometimes it's having community forums like this, but perhaps someplace else where you have those representatives there to kind of talk about the different perspectives that are there. For example, let's say you have a robbery, you got a guy charged with robbery, gun, or something like that. I'll just use that as an example. Well, the sentence range for that, let's say it's between 2 years and 15 years. A judge can issue a sentence or a guidance compliant sentence with a person receiving 2 years as a penalty for putting that gun in your face and for robbing you. Well, that person who does that does not necessarily have to do all 2 of those years. He or she might do a percentage of that time, and then the rest of the time on probation is also considered sentence compliant or guideline compliant. So that person who stuck that gun in your face and robbed you within a certain period of time back out in the community. Is that time that we have set, is that acceptable? Because when we start talking about this issue, especially when it comes from me, You know, the issue becomes, oh, you're talking about mass incarceration. I'm not talking about mass incarceration. I'm talking about keeping people safe in community. Why is it that hold on one second, sir. I'm going to come to you in a second. One second, okay?
So, Chief, we got press piece at the end. Let's do the walk here, okay?
Okay. But that's just kind of a little bit of some of the things that happen in that space that I think residents really need to really look at.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.